Just over 3 weeks ago, the Texas Senate acquitted Attorney General Ken Paxton in his impeachment trial. It was only the third time a sitting public official ever got to such a political trial. While we know how not enough senators voted for his conviction, managers from the Texas House just released evidence deemed not admissible during the 10-day trial. The extra documentation names Laura Olson, the woman Paxton is accused of having an affair with. This evidence also includes information on Nate Paul, the Austin real estate developer who was central to the House's case for impeachment. Here's what attorneys on both sides said about the information going public.
They're relevant, and this entire process is about transparency.
The case is long over. They lost. I'm not sure why they continued to try to litigate the case in the press.
Joining me now is Capitol correspondent Monica Maddens. Monica, give us a little more on these documents, because we're talking about hundreds of pages, right?
Yeah, Josh, that's right. The documents show more about the contracting home renovations for the Paxton's Austin home. And House managers allege the work was a bribe by Nate Paul in exchange for help with legal issues. Now, you might remember that Paxton's former personal assistant, Drew Wicker, he actually testified during the impeachment trial, and he said that he walked away with the impression that Paul was involved in the renovations of the Paxton's home, but ultimately couldn't prove that conclusively. However, these new emails reveal closer ties between the contractor communicating updates on the renovation directly with Paul. Here's what Aaron Epley described as a timeline of incomplete documentation from the construction company, despite it not being admissible as evidence during the impeachment trial.
And the absence of evidence is evidence. There was no intention or documentation that suggested Ken Paxton ever had the desire to pay a bill, and there was no bill.
The Attorney General's legal team has noted that Paxton ultimately directed the head of his blind trust to pay for the renovations, proving no bribe.
If that's so evident, why don't you put that into evidence? I guess they could have put into evidence had they had any relevance. So I'm not sure what they're doing.
Now, I want to be clear that Paxton's personal attorney has said that the FBI is reportedly investigating his client, but the feds have not filed any charges yet. And of course, Josh, we know that Paxton denies any and all wrongdoing in this.
Well, even though the political case is over, this clearly isn't finished. What's the latest on the original lawsuit filed by the whistleblowers from his office?
That's where things get a little interesting, Josh. They petitioned to the Texas Supreme Court to get this moving back along on the docket again. And the High Court agreed that the lawsuit should be active again and made that kind of ruling. There was a settlement back in January for roughly $3.3 million between the Attorney General's office and those former employees known as the whistleblowers. But it hinged on the legislature approving that money, since it would have been taxpayer dollars. And as we have reported, that's what started that initial investigation leading to the impeachment. So it's tough to say how this all will actually turn out, Josh.
Now, the Attorney General was also supposed to see some movement this coming week in Harris County, where he's facing multiple counts related to that long-delayed felony securities fraud trial. What's changing this week?
Yeah, Ken Paxton was set to have a hearing on Monday in Harris County. That was coincidentally the same day that this next special legislative session is supposed to start, but we actually just learned that that got moved to October 30th, and the reason is because Paxton's attorney, one of his lead attorneys, Dan Cogdell, has another unrelated trial that he is working on, so they had that time conflict, which is why the case got pushed back to October 30th. But at the hearing back in August, the judge said that they would likely be ruling on pre-trial motions and possibly make a decision on whether or not to set this actual trial date for the securities fraud case. Again, Paxton has denied wrongdoing in this case as well, and this was that one where he was indicted back in 2015 for those security fraud charges. Josh.
All right, Monica, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
How could you mix up these people?
A daughter is calling for change in the nursing home industry, following what the state called an error after her mother's death. We look at the impact a new federal proposal will mean for Texas care centers.